Hollow Bend lay nestled on the edge of a windswept desert, its dusty streets echoing with the whispers of a troubled past. The town's once thriving community had been a refuge for those seeking solace from the outside world, but over the years an ominous atmosphere settled in, thick like the heat that enveloped it. The air was imbued with an unsettling tension, as if the very ground held memories of anguish and betrayal. 10 years had passed since Caleb Briggs was wrongfully accused of murder, yet the aftermath of his execution still lingered like a shadow. The gallows stood at the town's center, a grim reminder of justice turned sour. On that fateful day, emotions ran high as families gathered to witness what they believed would restore order to their lives. Instead, it deepened the rift within Hollow Bend, dividing friends and families alike. Many proclaimed Caleb's guilt, convinced that their fear of an unknown threat needed resolution, while others, like Mara Lewin, clung to the belief in his innocence. Mara watched from afar as her father, Sheriff Lewin, took part in the decision that condemned Caleb to death. A knot of resentment twisted in her heart every time she thought of that day. How could he have played a role in the death of someone she had called a friend? The shame of it gnawed at her, fueling her determination to seek the truth behind the town's dark history. She found it hard to reconcile the man she loved and admired with the one who had wielded such power over life and death. As time passed and life in Hollow Bend resumed its somber rhythm, tales of Caleb's supposed resurrection began to surface. A bounty hunter's discovery of his disturbed grave igniting a wildfire of speculation among residents who were too eager to believe in ghosts. Sightings of a figure resembling Caleb spread like desert wind, inflating fears that perhaps justice had not been fully served after all. With each new rumor, Mara felt the stirrings of something deeper within her, a calling to confront the demons of her past. Driven by a mix of unresolved grief and anger towards her father's decisions, she stepped into the shadows cast by Caleb's legacy, ready to unravel the tangled web of lies and secrets that surrounded Hollow Bend. As she prepared to take a journey into the heart of darkness, she felt a weight upon her shoulders. The truth was waiting to be unearthed, and it could change everything. The day of Caleb Briggs' execution was etched in the minds of the residents of Hollow Bend, forever haunting their collective memory. Underneath the relentless sun, a crowd gathered, a mixture of dread and anticipation hanging in the air like an electric charge. The gallows stood ominously in the town square, a stark reminder of the irreversible consequences that justice could wield. Families assembled, some clutching their children, others exchanging hushed whispers about the man who had been accused of committing an unspeakable crime. Mara Lewin stood at the edge of the crowd, her heart pounding as she watched her friend, once full of laughter and life, shackled and led to his fate. She felt a deep ache in her chest, torn between the fervent belief in his innocence and the fear that had gripped the town. In those moments leading up to Caleb's hanging, she felt a profound sense of betrayal, not just for him but also for everything she believed in. Her father, Sheriff Lewin, stood nearby, his stern face betraying no emotion as he oversaw the proceedings. To Mara, he was both protector and executioner. How could he uphold the law while condemning an innocent soul? As the noose was placed around Caleb's neck, Mara's mind spiraled into memories of carefree childhood days spent exploring the outskirts of town together. She remembered laughter shared beneath the sprawling branches of an old oak tree, dreams whispered under starry skies. They had envisioned brighter futures away from Hollow Bend's dark shadows, dreams that now felt shattered and distant. The townspeople had already made up their minds, swept away by fear and the weight of a community desperate for answers. Some held signs demanding justice, others shouted accusations that echoed through Mara's mind long after they faded into silence. Caleb's guilt was assumed rather than proven, a casualty of hysteria rather than a fair trial, and Mara's heart broke every time she heard whispers comparing him to a monster. As the rope tightened and Caleb's final breaths were drawn amidst cries from the crowd, Mara realized it was not just Caleb they were executing, it was hope itself, the hope that truth and justice would prevail. In that moment, she vowed silently to seek out the truth behind his conviction, even if it meant challenging her father and unearthing secrets that had long lain buried beneath Hollow Bend's parched earth. The chilling weight of that day would haunt her forever, but it also ignited a flame within her, a determination to uncover what truly happened on that fateful night and to honor the memory of her friend. The sun was setting over Hollow Bend, casting long shadows that danced across the sandy ground, when a bounty hunter named Eli Harper arrived in town. He was a rugged man, his life spent tracking down fugitives and uncovering secrets hidden in the shadows. As he made his way toward the outskirts of town, he stumbled upon the local cemetery where a sense of unease hung heavily in the air. It was there he discovered something that sent tremors through the already superstitious community. Caleb Briggs' grave had been disturbed. The earth was freshly churned, and the wooden cross marking Caleb's final resting place leaned precariously, as if it too felt the disturbance. Eli's instincts kicked in, sensing that this was more than just a random act of vandalism. The news of the disturbed grave spread like wildfire through Hollow Bend, igniting old fears among its residents and reviving whispers of Caleb's innocence. Some speculated that he had indeed returned from the dead to avenge his wrongful death, stirring up a mixture of hope and dread. As Eli delved deeper into Caleb's past, reports began to arise throughout town of a mysterious figure seen haunting the outskirts during the early hours of dawn, a man strikingly similar to Caleb, dressed in ragged clothes with an expression full of anguish. The sightings fueled rumors and escalated tensions, slashing through the fabric of an already fractured town. It wasn't long before groups gathered at saloons, exchanging tales of the ghostly specter who wandered through their fears. Mara couldn't ignore the growing commotion. She felt a pull towards these sightings. They reignited her determination to uncover the truth behind her friend's execution. The more she heard about this mysterious figure resembling Caleb, the more a flicker of hope ignited within her. Perhaps he truly had returned, not as a ghost seeking vengeance, but as an echo yearning for justice. However, mixed within those tales were darker stories, rumors that spoke of blood connections between those who executed Caleb and malevolent forces lurking beneath Hollow Bend's arid soil. A palpable tension gripped the town. It became clear that someone or something was out for revenge against those who had condemned him. With every passing day, fear intertwined with curiosity, and Mara realized she couldn't remain on the sidelines any longer. The unveiling mystery beckoned her forward. Driven by an insatiable need for answers about what truly happened to Caleb and why his spirit seemed restless, she prepared herself for an investigation that would lead her into dark corners where long-buried truths lay waiting to resurface. The past was rising from its grave, and so too was Mara's resolve to confront it head-on. The atmosphere in Hollow Bend thickened with apprehension as rumors of Caleb's return circulated through the narrow streets. Whispers flared like wildfires, igniting dread among the townsfolk who had long ago resigned themselves to the shadows of their collective guilt. The sighting of a man resembling Caleb, roving the outskirts like a ghost from the past, turned speculation into a frenzy. Every shadow seemed to harbor secrets, every rustle of wind carried tales of dread. At the local saloon, patrons huddled together over half-empty glasses, their conversations punctuated by nervous laughter that barely masked their fear. "If Caleb's back, it can't be for anything good," muttered old Tom, a long-time resident nursing a whiskey with trembling hands. Others nodded in agreement, exchanging furtive glances as if expecting him to materialize before them. The sheriff's daughter was not immune to the chaos. Mara found herself at the heart of it all, feeling a heavy weight bearing down on her shoulders. As gossip spread, so did voices questioning her loyalty. Some dared to suggest she might be colluding with Caleb's spirit, almost painting her as an enemy within her own town. Those who once considered her a friend now glanced at her with suspicion and unease, believing her connection to Caleb made her a potential threat. Across town, the schoolteacher gathered the children around during recess to tell them tales meant to entertain, but instead stoked their fears, stories of restless spirits and vengeful ghosts seeking retribution on those who wronged them. "What if he comes for us?" one child asked with wide eyes, prompting gasps from others. The innocence of youth warped by superstition added fuel to their anxieties. Mothers hurriedly brought their children home early as darkness approached. Meanwhile, men who had been part of the trial began disappearing or were found dead under suspicious circumstances, each incident feeding into the growing belief that Caleb's spirit was exacting vengeance for his wrongful fate. A once solid community began fracturing, neighbors turning against one another in fear of who might be next. Mara's resolve grew stronger with each passing day as she witnessed how fear twisted friendships and obliterated trust. Her father's authoritative presence did little to assuage the panic. Even he seemed uncharacteristically rattled by the unfolding events. Farmers barricaded themselves in their homes at night while others took up arms in defense against imagined threats. In this fearful environment, Mara realized that uncovering the truth was more crucial than ever, not just for Caleb, but for Hollow Bend itself. With ghosts resurrecting old sins and shaking foundations built on deceit, she knew she had to plunge into the murky depths of this mystery before it consumed them all entirely. The town was desperate for answers. Perhaps its salvation lay not only in exposing Caleb's innocence, but in confronting its own dark legacy that haunted every alleyway and shadowed every heart. As the shadows lengthened in Hollow Bend, Mara Lewin found herself caught in an internal struggle that weighed heavily on her spirit. Each passing day deepened her conviction that Caleb Briggs had been wrongfully executed, yet a dark cloud hung over her, her father's role as sheriff in that fateful decision. The man she had always idolized, a protector of the law and her family, had committed an act that felt like betrayal to her heart. How could he have condemned an innocent friend to death? Mara often replayed that day in her mind, the way the crowd had roared for blood, how fear had twisted justice into something grotesque. Her father had stood resolute then, but now, as rumors of Caleb's possible resurrection spiraled into chaos, she saw cracks in his steely demeanor. The sheriff was not immune to the growing fear gripping the town. She could sense his unease during their brief conversations, the way he avoided discussing Caleb or the past. It frustrated her and ignited a fire within her, a desire to confront him about his decisions and seek answers she had long buried. The conflict between loyalty to her father and the need for truth clawed at Mara. She longed for his approval but also felt an insatiable pull toward justice for Caleb, her childhood friend whose laughter still echoed in her memory like a haunting melody. She could no longer ignore the whispers of discontent rising from within herself. With each report of men who had played a part in Caleb's execution disappearing or dying under suspicious circumstances, Mara grew increasingly determined to unravel the tangled web of lies surrounding his trial. Her investigation began as a quest for personal redemption. She needed to understand why her father had acted as he did and whether there were deeper reasons behind Caleb's conviction. Was it simply fear that drove him, or was he entangled in something darker? The weight of these questions overshadowed her thoughts as she gathered evidence and spoke with reluctant witnesses who were too afraid to speak up. Mara found herself standing at a crossroads. Should she confront her father and demand answers, or would it be wiser to delve deeper into the secrets hidden within Hollow Bend? Each step forward revealed more about the town than just its haunted past. It unveiled layers of complicity among those who thought they were safe from scrutiny. This journey was no longer just about Caleb. It was about uncovering the truth of who she was meant to be and what legacy she would carry forward. With renewed resolve burning in her chest, Mara decided it was time to seek answers, not just for Caleb, but for herself and all those trapped in the shadows of their own making. The truth awaited her just beyond the veil of fear that wrapped around Hollow Bend like an unshakable shroud. She would confront whatever lay ahead, determined not only to remember Caleb but to honor his spirit by revealing what had been hidden for far too long. Mara's investigation began with a sense of urgency, a fire igniting within her as she scoured the town for witnesses willing to speak about Caleb's trial. Each encounter was fraught with tension. Many were hesitant, their eyes darting away as if looking at her would summon ghosts from the past. She first approached Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who had lived in Hollow Bend longer than most could remember. Sitting on her creaky porch, Mrs. Henderson's hands trembled as she spoke in a hushed voice. "I saw things that night, dear," she confessed, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "Things I can't explain." With careful nudging from Mara, the old woman recounted the atmosphere surrounding the trial, how fear had gripped the community, pushing people into silence and complicity. She mentioned whispers of money changing hands among jurors and how vital witnesses had simply vanished before they could testify. With each new interview, Mara pieced together fragments of a narrative that painted a far different picture of that fateful night. There were accounts of men being offered hush money to keep quiet, and others hinting at a powerful figure orchestrating Caleb's downfall, someone who had much to gain from silencing him forever. The threads of conspiracy began to weave through her thoughts like tendrils of smoke obscuring the truth. Determined to dig deeper, Mara turned to the town archives housed in the aging library building next to the saloon. Dust motes danced in the sunlight as she sifted through records and newspaper clippings from a decade ago. Her heart raced as she discovered discrepancies in testimonies. Certain key statements didn't align with what she had heard from witnesses. It was clear some truths had been deliberately buried beneath layers of deceit. One particular article caught her eye, a piece written by a journalist now long gone, hinting at corruption within local law enforcement during Caleb's trial. The mention of bribery sent chills down her spine. It mirrored everything Mrs. Henderson had whispered about so many years ago. As Mara delved into this labyrinth of lies, she began to feel the weight of responsibility resting heavily on her shoulders. Not only did she owe it to Caleb to unveil the truth, but she also felt compelled to protect those still living under the specter of this dark history. The fear-gripping Hollow Bend was palpable. It seeped into every interaction and colored every glance exchanged among neighbors. With newfound determination, Mara realized that uncovering the truth about Caleb's conviction was only part of her journey. She also needed to confront those who had perpetuated this web of lies and deceit. As she prepared for what lay ahead, she steeled herself for conflict, knowing that exposing long-hidden secrets might not only challenge the town's fragile peace, but also shake the very foundations upon which her family and her father had built their lives. In this pursuit for justice and clarity, Mara felt herself drawing closer to a revelation. Perhaps Caleb's fate was intertwined with something deeper and darker, a force tied not just to one man's death, but to an entire community's willingness to overlook its sins in exchange for safety and silence. As Mara delved deeper into the mysteries surrounding Caleb's wrongful execution, she stumbled upon references to an ancient malevolent force tied to the very land of Hollow Bend, forces that had shaped its dark history long before Caleb's trial. Legends whispered among the town's elders spoke of a curse, one that bound the community to an unholy pact made generations ago. During the town's founding, a group of settlers had committed unspeakable acts in their quest for prosperity, invoking powers best left undisturbed. The more Mara researched, the more she found unsettling tales rooted in local folklore. They spoke of shadowy figures emerging at twilight, their eyes burning with vengeance against those who wronged them. Old Salvator, a local historian and recluse, had penned notes detailing how past tragedies seemed to echo through time, with each injustice calling forth dark energies that demanded retribution. Caleb's execution was merely another chapter in this twisted narrative, a result of a cycle that perpetually haunted Hollow Bend. Determined to uncover the truth behind these legends, Mara sought out Salvator himself. The old man lived on the outskirts of town in a crumbling cabin surrounded by whispering trees. When she arrived, he greeted her with both skepticism and curiosity, his weathered face hinting at a mind burdened with secrets too heavy to bear. As they sat across from each other, he spoke in hushed tones about the malevolent history that coursed through the veins of Hollow Bend. "Justice has a price here," he warned softly, his eyes flickering with understanding as he read Mara's determination. Caleb was merely a pawn in a much larger game, one played by forces beyond our control. He recounted stories of previous trials stained by corruption and betrayal, always ending in bloodshed or unexplained deaths among those who had participated in condemning innocent souls. With each tale, Mara felt an undeniable connection forming not just between Caleb's fate and the shadows around her, but also within herself. Suggestions that guilt could manifest as anger or even vengeance if left unchecked. Impulsively, she asked him if he believed Caleb was truly back to seek revenge or if it was all just superstitions gripping the townsfolk in fear. Salvator paused thoughtfully before replying, "Perhaps both are true. Sometimes spirits do linger because they are bound by anger not only for themselves, but for all injustices perpetuated against them." Armed with this new perspective on Hollow Bend's curse, along with a renewed sense of purpose, Mara realized that unraveling Caleb's fate might not only reveal buried truths, but also offer her a way to confront this ancient evil. Her discoveries began to pull at threads woven deeply into the community's fabric. Each revelation about Caleb seemed inexorably linked to dark moments from Hollow Bend's past. Mara now faced an urgent question. Could she break this cycle of retribution and unearth the truth about both Caleb's execution and what lurked beneath their town's surface? As she prepared herself for confrontation, she felt something awakening within her, a resolute desire not only to bring justice for Caleb, but perhaps to address a much larger battle against the malevolent forces resonating within Hollow Bend itself. In doing so, she understood she might finally find peace for both him and herself amidst the chaos enveloping her world. As the tension in Hollow Bend escalated, a chilling wave of violence swept through the town, striking at those who had taken part in Caleb's trial. The first death was that of Harold Finch, a juror known for his hardline stance against Caleb. He was found lifeless in his field, his body cold and contorted beneath a tree, with no apparent cause for his demise. Whispers spread quickly. Some said it was a heart attack brought on by guilt, while others insisted it was a punishment delivered by Caleb's vengeful spirit. The townsfolk's fear mounted as more followed Harold's fate. Old Tom, who had loudly proclaimed Caleb's guilt during the trial, met his end when he was discovered in the saloon, his drink untouched and an expression of horror frozen on his face. Rumors ignited once more as tales of a ghostly figure resembling Caleb were shared around dim candlelit tables. Each unexplained death intensified the frenzy surrounding Mara's investigation. She could feel the weight of danger pressing down upon her. Mara's determination to uncover the truth intensified alongside the fear coursing through Hollow Bend. Each death felt like a warning, a reminder that her quest for justice might come at a high cost. Despite the dangers looming ever closer, she pressed on, seeking answers from those still standing, the witnesses who had remained silent out of fear or complicity. During one such encounter with Darlene, a woman who had worked as a waitress during Caleb's trial, Mara saw visible tremors run through her hands as she recounted what she had seen. "I saw things I shouldn't have," Darlene whispered, glancing over her shoulder as if she expected someone to overhear. "People taking money. Promises made behind closed doors." With each word, Mara felt an unsettling connection to the specter of vengeance that seemed to drape over Hollow Bend like fog. Meanwhile, shadows loomed larger in Mara's mind. Could it be that their collective guilt had awakened something darker? As she studied the faces of those around her, some fearful, some remorseless, she realized that fear itself might be as dangerous as the dark forces believed to be at play. With each passing day and each new death, Hollow Bend transformed further into an unrecognizable landscape ruled by suspicion and dread. As whispers coalesced into paranoia, Mara understood that if she didn't act soon to expose the truths rotting beneath the town's foundation, she risked being swept away by this storm of retribution herself. The perilous path ahead called to her, a journey fraught with uncertainty where every step could lead either to uncovering justice for Caleb or ensnaring her within the same web of darkness that had claimed so many before her. Recognizing that time was running thin, Mara steeled her resolve. She had to confront not only the malevolent forces tied to Hollow Bend, but also the reality of how history continued to bind them all together through fear and bloodshed. The stakes had never been higher, but she could feel Caleb's spirit urging her on, reminding her that only by confronting these evils could they hope for redemption and healing to break free from their past. Determined to expose the truth behind Caleb's wrongful execution, Mara intensified her investigation into Hollow Bend's shady past, driven by the urgency of recent events. Each new revelation felt like a piece of a larger puzzle that had been deliberately buried under layers of deceit. She began by revisiting the courthouse, where the trial had taken place, rummaging through old records and dusty files in search of discrepancies. It was during one of these late-night sessions in the dimly lit archives that Mara found a file that sent shivers down her spine. Tucked away among mundane documents was a list of witnesses who had been scheduled to testify on Caleb's behalf, witnesses who had simply vanished without a trace before the trial commenced. The implications were staggering. It suggested that someone had gone to great lengths to ensure Caleb's conviction by silencing those who could have cleared his name. As she pieced together the timeline, Mara discovered that several jurors had suspiciously changed their testimonies just days before the trial. This led her to suspect jury tampering, which only deepened her sense of indignation. She needed more than whispers and rumors. She craved tangible evidence that would expose the corruption festering within the town's justice system. Her next stop was Darlene's home, where she hoped to trace back some leads regarding the murky dealings surrounding Caleb's trial. Darlene had mentioned seeing men exchanging money discreetly, and Mara was eager to hear more about what she might know. When she arrived at Darlene's door, she found the woman visibly shaken, her hands shaking as if gripped by an unseen. "Mara, I can't talk here," Darlene whispered urgently, glancing around as if expecting someone to overhear them. "They're watching." The mention of they sent alarm bells ringing in Mara's mind, it was evident that Darlene had witnessed something dangerous. In hushed tones, Darlene recounted how she had seen a group meeting late at night behind the saloon where Caleb had often gathered with friends. They discussed arrangements for keeping certain witnesses quiet and even talked about threats made against those who dared speak out against the town's narrative, a narrative crafted by those in power. Mara felt a surge of determination coursing through her veins. This wasn't just about uncovering secrets. It was about bringing justice not only for Caleb, but also for the community shackled by fear and lies. With every piece of information Darlene provided, Mara recognized how deeply entrenched these corrupt practices were within Hollow Bend's fabric. Armed with this new evidence and driven by an unquenchable thirst for truth, Mara vowed to confront those responsible for both Caleb's execution and the subsequent threats against anyone who dared challenge their authority. The stakes were higher than ever. Not only did she need to reveal the dark underbelly of Hollow Bend's justice system, but she also needed to protect herself and those who stood with her from becoming victims in this deadly game. The atmosphere around her seemed charged with energy, as if Caleb's spirit guided her forward. Each step brought her closer to confronting not just a legacy of injustice, but perhaps even the malevolent forces tied to it all, forces that would stop at nothing to keep their secrets hidden from prying eyes. With resolve hardening in her chest, Mara prepared for what lay ahead. A battle not merely against individuals, but against an entire system determined to silence the truth once and for all. The tension in Hollow Bend reached a boiling point as Mara prepared to confront the entity behind the recent killings. Shadows loomed larger than ever, and whispers of Caleb's spirit stirring for revenge seeped into every corner of her mind. She felt a powerful connection to him, one that had grown with each piece of evidence she uncovered, a bond forged not only by their shared past but also by a common purpose: to achieve justice. As night descended upon the town, Mara found herself standing at the edge of the cemetery, the site where Caleb had been so unjustly buried. The air was thick with anticipation, and she could feel an electric charge pulsing through her veins. It was time for her to make a choice: continue on her quest for truth or align herself with Caleb's vengeful spirit to exact retribution on those who had wronged him. Suddenly, a chilling wind swept through the graveyard, rustling the leaves and whispering secrets long hidden. Mara closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to be enveloped by the power that lingered in the air. She could almost sense Caleb's presence urging her forward, steering her toward the path they must take together. Just then, Mara was jolted from her reverie as she caught sight of movement out of the corner of her eye, a dark figure emerging from behind one of the graves. In an instant, fear surged through her. Was it Caleb, or was this something else entirely? As she stepped closer, she realized it was Eli Harper, the bounty hunter who had originally discovered Caleb's disturbed grave. "Mara," he called out urgently as he approached, "you shouldn't be here alone." His face was pale and set with concern as he joined her at the edge of Caleb's final resting place. "I need to know what really happened," Mara replied resolutely. "I have to understand if this vengeance is justified or if I'm being led down a dangerous path." Eli hesitated before speaking. "You know, some will see you as an enemy for seeking this truth. Those people will do anything to protect themselves." With his warning echoing in her ears, Mara felt torn. Aligning with Caleb's spirit might mean unleashing chaos upon Hollow Bend, yet if it also meant exposing corruption and securing justice for those lost souls, maybe it would be worth it. As they stood together in silence beneath a shroud of stars, Mara recognized she could no longer shy away from confronting what lay ahead. If she chose to embrace Caleb's wrathful spirit as an ally in uncovering hidden truths about their community's dark history, she risked losing control over everything she held dear, her father's legacy included. But turning back now seemed impossible. Both justice for Caleb and redemption for herself hung in the balance. With renewed determination fueling her resolve, Mara knew that whatever choice she made would alter not just Hollow Bend's fate, but also shape her own identity forever. "We'll do this together," Eli said softly, sensing her inner turmoil. "Together we can confront whatever evil has its grip on this town." With his words bolstering her courage against uncertainty and fear, Mara took a deep breath as she prepared herself for what lay ahead. A battle that could either redeem their histories or plunge them into darkness once more. It was time to choose between light and shadow. stop those responsible for these killings, or embrace something darker to expose an even deeper truth lurking beneath Hollow Bend's facade. As the dust settled after the confrontation in Hollow Bend, Mara stood at a crossroads, weighing the consequences of her decision. She had chosen to confront the dark forces that had haunted the town rather than fully align with Caleb's vengeful spirit. Instead of unleashing chaos, she resolved to expose the corruption that had spawned this cycle of retribution. It was a choice born from a desire for true justice rather than mere vengeance. In a meeting that felt like an echo of past grievances, Mara gathered the townspeople who had long been silent. Eli stood by her side, his presence a steadfast reminder of her mission. As she shared the evidence she'd uncovered, missing witnesses, jury tampering, and corrupt practices, gasps rippled through the crowd. The air buzzed with tension as the reality of their collective complicity threatened to upend everything they believed about their town. "I know that many of you feared speaking out," Mara began, her voice steady despite the weight of eyes upon her. "But if we want Hollow Bend to heal, we must confront our past together." The murmurs grew louder as old grudges surfaced, but Mara pressed on, driven by a conviction that justice could only prevail through transparency and unity. The townsfolk hesitated, grappling with their own guilt while facing their history head-on. Yet as she spoke, reminding them of Caleb's innocence and how they had allowed fear to dictate their actions, a shift began to occur. One by one, voices emerged from the crowd, witnesses willing to share their stories and jurors ready to confess their regret. The resolve in Mara's heart swelled as she witnessed this transformation. Perhaps it was possible for the town to forge a new path forward. They could not undo what had been done to Caleb, but they could reclaim their futures by embracing honesty over deception. However, as dawn broke over Hollow Bend and hope began to shimmer like light piercing through shadows, Mara sensed that not everyone would accept this change willingly. Those who orchestrated Caleb's downfall would not go down quietly. They were still lurking in the background, determined to protect their secrets at any cost. As threats loomed in the distance and darkness threatened to creep back into their lives, Mara realized that her battle was far from over. The cost of seeking justice would be steep. Loyalty would be tested as alliances shifted and allegiances were forged anew. With unwavering determination etched upon her face, she embraced her responsibility, not just for Caleb's sake, but for all those who had suffered in silence for too long. The resolution she sought was not merely personal, it resonated throughout the community's very fabric. And so began a new chapter for Hollow Bend, a slow journey toward healing marred by struggle and sacrifice, but one guided by truth and anchored in hope. In confronting their haunted pasts together, they would reclaim their town's spirit and rewrite its narrative for generations to come.